A millionaire pretended to be broke to teach his children a lesson, but what happened in the end will leave you speechless. Ingratitude toward those who help us or have helped us at some point in our lives not only manifests itself in the life of a man who does not know how to say thank you, but also in behavior. With those who have helped you, the attitude you take every day to show gratitude for being genuine with those who reach out to us, it will be restrained. Kindness to those who gave us life and to those who went out of their way for us with those who have sacrificed part of their lives so that we can be good men. Being grateful does not just mean opening your mouth and saying thank you. Gratitude goes further and can last a lifetime, mainly towards our parents. I am your friend, Carlos Matthews. Don't take it off that this story has to begin. So there on top of a building in his large and cold office was Don Alfonso Ruben Ruiz, great fortune from the Ruiz family, and he had heard from all sides, and sometimes he stopped to think that looking at the other buildings there was a void that he had not been able to fill a few years ago at 73 years old. He had always tried not to appear so. With the purchasing power he had given him, he could live and have what he wanted, but nothing could fill the void he had created 10 years ago when his wife, a victim of aggressive cancer, died without him being able to do anything since then. He understood that money could buy everything and give you a better life without. However, he could not buy the most precious things, such as health and life, and pain took him by an eye. Although they lived in the same city, they spent their time traveling with their families, and events such as the birth of their own children had absorbed them to the point where they didn't even come to see him anymore. What pain and sometimes embarrassment caused him to ask them to come see him, and when he had decided to go visit them, all said and agreed that they were traveling on vacation. They handled their meetings with the assistant managers by cell phone, and the days when at least Mr. Alfonso was supposed to see them, days like the meetings of the company's general board of managers, they all notified that they would be connected by video call, and that was the only time where he greeted his children. Everything seemed to flourish when he greeted his children. Everything seemed to flourish when he greeted his children. Everything seemed to flourish when he greeted his children. Everything. Don Alfonso then understood that the man was observing the painting, and as he marveled at the beauty of nature, he approached him and, from afar, scolded him for having stopped to look at the painting. He asked him if he would like to visit that place sometime, and when the man turned around and realized that he was behind him, with total disinterest, he said yes. I would like, but that would never happen with this salary that they give me in this company. It is not enough for me, of course. The man did not know that the 73-year-old man who was next to him was nothing more and nothing less than the owner of the millionaire company for that he worked. Don Alfonso for a moment repressed his annoyance and laughed. How much do you earn for doing the maintenance of the facilities? He asked him. For $900 a month. I wish there were 1,000, he said, and he spat on the ground. You can imagine that the man untied his tongue. He had thought that that old man was just another employee, and you told him, well, I'm going there too. Oh well, at least you studied, and at least I imagine you passed the $2,000. Well, something like that, my dear friend, answered Mr. Alfonso. Look, I am a friend of the owner of the company. I know him because I started working here for a favor that he owed me, the 50-year-old man said. Look, I'll arrange for your salary to reach $2,000. What do you think? Can you do that? He said something doubtful. Yes, I can. I'm in charge of promoting the employees and buying everything for this company, so that amount would be good for me. My wife is sick, and I've been working for the company for more than 6 years. The company and I do my job well, the man assured. Then he added, I'm sorry for what I said. You know, sometimes you just have to vent your frustrations, and as he said this, he laughed and asked, do you want to go for a walk? Said Don Alfonso, I'll go do. I was shopping for the company, friend, but I can't move from here. My shift still ends in a couple of hours. Well, I'll make a call. Mr. Alfonso, your name has been called. Guillermo answered the man while animatedly taking off his gloves and collecting the cleaning utensils. So they both left the company, and Don Alfonso took off his suit, put on some glasses, and went for a walk around the city, where he discovered that the man had been a teacher in Chapultepec. But he had migrated to the capital that day, and Don Alfonso told him that he already had the $2,000 in his real bank account, said Guillermo, my friend. Thank you, let's not walk, let's go get a taxi. Well, Don Alfonso answered like that. The man invited Don Alfonso to eat. He made him eat in wheelbarrows in the city and eat food that Don Alfonso had stopped consuming for a long time to stay healthy, but what else gave him the feeling of freedom and well-being? What was the best thing that had happened to him after the death of his wife? We encourage you to buy, the man reminded him. Oh, some things are closer to the city center. Well, said the man, I know the city well. Now tell me what you want, and I'll get it for you. I doubt it a lot, my friend, Don Alfonso said, adding, I already coordinated that. Well, I hope it's like that, the man replied, because we're having a good time. And while they were talking about this, the man then observed a sporty Mercedes-Benz. Hell, said the man while holding his head. To buy one, Don Alfonso asked him what he would do with one of those. Over 60. The good thing is that the company admitted me to its inclusion program, and, well, I still have strength. You know that age sometimes reduces our spirits, too, Mr. Alfonso. When he heard this, he was thoughtful and it went on. I remembered what I came to do. They asked me to get a car for the owner. I have to really try it. Are you going to buy it? Asked the incredulous man, Guillermo. I already told you that I am in charge of acquisitions for the company. Well, I also have to prove it. Don't worry, I'll fix everything if we go for a walk and then a trip. You know, I know which lake you saw painting. Well then, friendo, and let's go for your wife, said Don Alfonso. Guillermo, the man in charge of cleaning the administrative area of the building, could not believe it. His life was going through a unique experience. Let's go, he said without thinking about it, and they bought the car. Then Don Alfonso signed the papers, and they went out with the car to pick up the cleaning man's wife. What should I do to get promoted? Asked the cleaning man. Don Alfonso replied, well, I only know what you do, and surely the owner will know about you. That thought was etched in that man's mind when he arrived, and it was exactly as it was. As the woman had told him, she was taking her last breaths. It was the saddest moment for Don Alfonso because it reminded his wife that money could not buy life, but would allow him to give her a better quality of life and fulfill the desire of that man's wife, who contained his desire to cry, so they left in a luxurious Mercedes-Benz sports car. It was the best experience they had had to live after a long time. They had driven for more than 16 hours and had only made one stop. The conversation had become so entertaining that by the time they stopped when they arrived at the lake, they discovered that the next day they had opened the convertible and the woman of that man had died. You can imagine their sadness. Later, with great pain, they buried her in the same cemetery of that town. The location did not matter with sadness. Guillermo said goodbye to his wife, and when Don Alfonso observed him, he looked at him fixedly and said, life has to go. The next day, they would walk to the top of a canyon that would allow them to see the lake as it had been shown in the painting that man had observed the day before in the company offices. Then they arrived. From there, the view of the valley was beautiful, and the silence said a lot. Both men had lost something or someone before reaching that place, and neither of us had reached it yet. Their tears said it all. You know, I have 3 children. I have given them everything. I have supported them. I have given them work, and they still depend on me. When they were supposed to have more time to come see me, they bought houses far away, and they spend their time traveling. I have done everything for them, and now I am here alone. If it were not for you, my good friend Guillermo, I stopped by the office so many times that I can't even remember greeting you. Without a doubt, we have different stories in the same world. Guillermo never tired of thanking him for the opportunity, and he apologized. He hugged and consoled him. My dear friend, didn't have any children. My little girl was the only family I had, said Guillermo, and now he's not here. The friends hugged each other, it was as if two worlds had met to taste parts of each other's lives. Don Alfonso, if my children were dependent on me, I would have already informed them that there was no more work and that my business had gone bankrupt, and Don Alfonso burst out laughing. The man kept thinking about making more jokes after hearing this, but Don Alfonso had decided to just listen to that part. Do you think it would work? What did the distracted man say about cutting off my children's livelihood? My good friend Alfonso said to stop feeding the chickens and they will come to chop the sack of corn. What a strange idea. Would it really work? After that conversation, Don Alfonso coordinated the rental of a Modesto apartment and settled there, inviting his widowed friend to live with him and his things. Guillermo asked, "Go and bring only what is of great value to you." The impressed man went for his things and still did not understand the magnitude of what his help meant for that millionaire man. Don Alfonso, said the surprised man, "and what do I have to do?" "You just follow me and do what I say, Dada." "Well, that's exciting," answered Guillermo, remembering what he had experienced up to now. So the old millionaire called his children and announced the state of the company, and not only that, but he would cut their salaries if their percentages fell to try to reinvest and thus save the company. As you can imagine, incredible as it may seem, the three of them immediately stopped what they were doing and took the first flight back to find out how they had done. After that, Don Alfonso then planned a dinner at his house, where he would explain in detail what had happened and what they would do now. His friend Guillermo was preparing to get everything ready, as was to be expected. Guillermo was surprised. "Look, friend, I have to get everything ready here," he asked me. Don Alfonso, the company's owner, stated. "Ah well, now everything makes sense," said Guillermo. The man had been amazed at how huge the house was. Up to 100 people could live comfortably, he said. "My friend, you will be in charge of receiving and attending to the guests." "Of course, it counts with me," said Guillermo, who didn't know who he was helping. So the day arrived very early and the supposed guests arrived. He attended them with great kindness, hoping that his efforts to get everything ready for the meeting would catch the attention of the company's owner, whom he hoped to meet in person, and he would be promoted. He hoped he hadn't lost that idea, and that this was his chance. The attendant man now recognized the faces of those who arrived, but he waited for the owner, whom he still believed he did not know was Don Alfonso. He had disappeared for a few minutes, but after this the murmurs among the attendees were endless. He then appeared dressed in his best suit, bringing a pot, and Guillermo with the rest of the banquet both served the guests. Guillermo, on the other hand, was waiting for the place. The main row was waiting for the owner when, suddenly, without him recovering or noticing, Don Alfonso sat in said seat and said, "Welcome." Guillermo's smile changed to amazement. "Because of his mind, you can sit down." "My friend," said Don Alfonso's daughter. Then he recognized Guillermo. "He is not in charge of cleaning. I hired his father." "What exactly does he do in our home, our daughter?" "Guillermo is a great friend of mine, and now he is my administrative assistant, but we'll talk about that later. I'm sorry to see you bothered on your trips. I just wanted to see you together at home again like in the old days with the company." Nothing really happened, so while he was still talking, one of his sons interrupted him. "Father, you made us come for nothing. You invented all of this just to see us," said the other son. "But if we talk by video call every day from other places," the daughter, at that moment everyone showed their discontent. Don Alfonso's heart could not resist such hardness. "How can you be so callous?" he asked, rising from his seat at the table to finish his meal and proceed to the living room, where I would deliver my provisions. "And if you want, you can leave later." "Guillermo, now I understand everything." After a few hours in the room, Don Alfonso mustered the courage to teach them a lesson that he had not given them as children. "Now they are relieved of their positions because I believe I do not need them because of the managers they have hired to replace them. Guillermo will assist me with that, because only a good man is enough to look after your interests. If you still want to work and spend your life and pleasures, the machinery warehouse is available. As you will understand, the machinery workshop was the most successful. The worst place to work was around heavy machinery in the hydraulic mechanics workshop, where there was an abundance of grease and dirt because all the machinery was maintained there. And Mr. Alfonso, knowing this, he added that the day they learn to value how things are achieved, I will let them return to the company offices, and saying this, he went to his room. Everyone complained and tried to follow him, but his personal security prevented them. Guillermo was left behind. The children had no other option but to accept, and there they learned what it really meant to work for more than 2 years. Guillermo kept them there until they realized what it meant to appreciate their father's efforts, and above all, that they owed him everything. They were ashamed, even though they had resisted their father's decision for a long time. They planned to spend time with him over the weekend, but when they arrived at his massive house, they discovered that his father had already died. In front of him, Guillermo was crying as if he were a brother. There was everything now, the lesson, the time, the money, but his father was gone. Guillermo was crying because, after 2 years of working and supervising the entire company, a document recently came into his hands along with a check. My dear friend, if you think my children deserve to return to the company offices, I'll leave it up to you. Thank you for being a good, faithful, and loyal friend. You've been through the best and worst times. Don't worry about anything, my lawyer will take care of all that. You just keep an eye on my interests while you can. This is your first check. The man who had only been an assistant now started to open that envelope, and I couldn't believe it, and there was a little note. What was it saying about liquidity? Get the salary you believe you deserve, and then there's a blank check. The millionaire father had taught his children a valuable lesson. Who did not stop regretting. Now I am in front of my great friend Alfonso's grave, almost out of strength, and I will meet him soon. My name is Guillermo. What a moving and instructive story, my dear friends and friends, that you would have done. Do not forget to subscribe, it is free. Do not forget to share, it costs you nothing. And above all, do not forget those who have ever served you or have shaken your hand. That is called gratitude. I am your friend Carlos Matthews, always giving you the best in stories to reflect on. What did you think of this story without a place? Undoubtedly, the principles and teachings embedded in it apply to our lives. Don't move. Stay there, I'll still share one more story that comes next. Bless you, I lived in this old car without knowing who it belonged to or what my father once hid there. He told me when I was still a child that when a man stops observing his surroundings, when he stops counting the blessings that God gives us every day, he stops perceiving the opportunities, and God gives him a lesson so that once and for all he gets out of the hole in which he finds himself. Unfortunately, many of us go blind. We stop seeing even the most basic things, and we become a beggar sitting on a gold bench, which, while incredible, is not ideal. As strange as it may seem, while I tell you this incredible story ahead of time, very few of us realize how much we treasure this heartbeat and life. Do not forget to subscribe, it is free. My name is Carlos Matthews, and the following story must begin with how I arrived in the La Quebrada neighborhood when I was barely 6 years old. My father had recently moved, and my father, an accountant, and my mother, a school teacher, had managed to buy land with a lot of effort, and now we had a place to stay before we had lived like gypsies, as my grandmother used to say. I was standing in front of what was my humble house when I observed him arrive with an old car. It made one last sound and it went off, but not only did it go off for the moment, but until I turned 17, his house looked abandoned because of his way of getting there. Every day that he was not doing well, the children who played near my house tried never to run into him or to have him. The ball they were playing with did not fall near his house because he used to burst them. He really was a guy who swore all the time. I never tried to find out if that was really true, but one afternoon while I was sweeping the porch of my house, I saw him cry. Bitterly, I was already 17 years old, and I was really sorry. I had always seen him do the same thing every day. He slept in that car, and that seemed strange to me, but it also caught my attention as a teenager, and I couldn't let it go. That opportunity to know more about him and why his life seemed so tragic. I remember getting closer. And although my heart strongly felt the myths I had heard about him, I took courage and said, with a nervous tone, "He is a well-behaved neighbor." I thought the worst. But, astounded, I stayed. When the man who looked like a beggar answered me, "Well, I haven't been well for a long time, and how are you, boy?" For the first time in my life, I didn't know what to answer. I had seen him a long time ago, and now I was a meter away from him and we were also talking, so I went over and sat near him. We talked about our stories, and there I was able to ask him many questions about that old car where he used to sleep. "Why don't you come into your house?" I asked. "It brings back bad memories. I had a wife and a son, but things were not going well for me at work, and I became a drinker. The state took my son from me, and now he lives with his mother, and I occasionally gave him some money." "Ah, well," I said. I knew at that moment that his name was Edward and that he was a car mechanic or something like that. "And how did the car end up here, Mr. Edward? I saw a few years ago that you parked it and never started it again." "This car is not mine. It belongs to a client, a friend, or a partner. I don't even remember anymore. It's the reason for my ruin." And that's what I remember. One day, an American arrived with this car, gave me an initial, and told me to repair it. "We'll sell it, buy everything, and I'll be back in a few days." I invested everything I had, because I knew the man had money, and he had come to the garage on other occasions to repair other cars, which gave me confidence, and he also made me sign some papers to become his partner. I didn't understand what that meant, but what matters now is that I'm broke and no one can help me out of this. After saying these things, he took a breath, was silent for a few minutes, and then he continued, and then he disappeared, and nothing is known about him. He had to close my workshop because he never came back, but you don't know. I know where he lives. I asked him because he had an apartment. I went to look for him. Booty watched the car, and although it had flat tires and the paint was dull from the sun, its interior looked preserved. Old Edward slept in it on occasion and kept it clean on the inside. "I hoped that one day," said old Edward, "he would return and give me back the $6,000 I spent repairing the interior and the gearbox." He repeated that over and over, and he has not tried to sell it. I asked him. "I have not touched anything like that since I closed my workshop forever, so I have left it. I searched its documents to go look for it. Nothing else. But you know that I did not find it." It turned out that the guy's name was Mike Parker, and he was a classic car dealer as well as a classic car auctioneer. He had dedicated himself to going all over Ecuador and looking for the oldest cars to repair and make collectibles, which he would later resell. His stay in Ecuador had unfortunately also had business purposes, as the plane on which he was flying from Los Angeles to Colombia had crashed. Not only that, but old Edward remembered signing some papers as a partner in that business, but he claimed that Mike had left with all the money that day I arrived with that news, and old Edward, through tears, said he couldn't believe it. For 5 years they had worked together and he hadn't known anything. He thanked me and threw his cap on the ground. "All is lost," he said, and spat on the ground vehemently. "Mr. Edward, allow me?" I asked, alluding to letting me. He searched the glove compartment of the car, nodded, and looked at me out of the corner of his eye. On the vehicle ownership card, I stated that the Aston Martin must be a 4 GT Sagato. You can also see below that it is owned by Parker and Mac Riles. Old Edward heard me read in a low voice and asked whose property Parker and Mac Riles were. "Repeat that as my last name," he said, and asked why they had those names. I knew Parker and Mac Riles were referring to a real company, so I asked him how many cars he had repaired with Mike. He said, "I don't know, like 50. I think those were already sold here." "Well, if they weren't sold, maybe they exist, Mr. McCreerless. The 49 because this one hadn't yet come to sell. I was much more interested in knowing that I, with 17 years of wisdom, and Edward, with 50 years of wisdom, could have passed and reached the bottom in those days when a fair exhibition of classic cars would take place in Ecuador, and I wanted to know a little more about that business. Fortunately for me, I arrived, and I found out that they would hold an auction at the end. I walked to old Edward's house and told him everything. He couldn't believe it. When I investigated, I found out that for the car where old Edward was sleeping, they could pay up to $10 million. I thought that would be true. So we went to the public records. Old Edward was nervous. We consulted with Parker and McGreglis. The manager told us that the company was still working and that it continued to import and export collector cars as well as modern cars. Everything was in order, so I explained to the manager that only senior partners can access internal information. Edward, of course it was one of them, and right there he would find out not only about that, but also that Parker had deposited an amount into a bank account every month. I couldn't believe how the faces of both of us changed when we heard the possibility that there was a monthly deposit in a company account in Ecuador. The company in Ecuador was still receiving remittances. Edward was crying. He couldn't believe it, let alone me. There was a total of $300,000 in the account for the maintenance of some cars, as well as a warehouse where supposedly the cars that Edward had repaired were also located and that apparently had not been sold. There I was walking next to a beggar who would soon become a millionaire, if he hadn't always been one, and he, because he was pessimistic, hadn't realized the money existed and he only needed to sign some papers and present others in his hands. A card now that said remittances from the United States for maintenance of 50 cars in a warehouse in the capital of Quito, and not only that he had the papers proving that. They have always come to inquire about them, but they have all left all correspondence. That day, old Edward was informed of everything that his friend Parker had done. He had been converted into a sociopath only a week before the cars were sent to him. However, he remembered that his friend had advised him to stay with the Aston Martin. How that man's life changed in his last few years with his family and his son, and how he rose from rags to riches, despite everything, and how I, with 20 years of experience, worked with him for more than 10 years until yesterday. This vision is so that we can see what we are up against from time to time and not be dragged down by pain and life's blows, so that we can remember the times when we are happy, which are many more than the times when we are sad, and so that we can always be grateful to God. He had, after all, been a demon imprisoned in a gold bank. Please leave a comment below about how you felt about this story, dear subscribers and subscribers-to-be. Also, share this story with anyone who might find it interesting. Well, I hope you enjoyed this incredible story. Don't forget to watch the suggested video and share this stories with some friend. See you in the following video.